It's 11:47 p.m. The deadline was yesterday. You've reorganized your desktop icons, alphabetized a bookshelf you don't remember owning, and watched 4 videos about a country you'll never visit. The work is still sitting there, untouched, glowing, waiting, and somewhere underneath the guilt, a quiet voice says the same thing it always says. What is wrong with me? You already know the lecture: discipline, time management, just do it. You've heard it so many times it's become wallpaper. Words that used to sting and now just sit there, useless. Because here's what nobody tells you. Procrastination was never about laziness. It was never about willpower. It's not a character flaw you inherited or a habit you failed to build. It's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you from something it perceives as a threat. And that threat isn't the task, it's the feeling the task creates. Psychologists call this emotion regulation failure. Procrastination isn't a time management problem. It's a mood management problem wearing a to-do list. When you avoid a task, you're not avoiding the work itself. You're avoiding the anxiety, the boredom, the self-doubt, the fear of falling short that the work stirs up in you. Your brain treats that discomfort like danger, and danger gets one instruction: escape. So you escape, not into laziness, but into anything that offers relief right now. This is where it gets interesting, because inside your skull, 2 systems are at war. The limbic system, ancient, emotional, obsessed with the present moment, and the prefrontal cortex, newer, rational, capable of imagining a future self who will deal with this later. The limbic system doesn't care about your deadline. It doesn't care about your goals. It only cares about how you feel right now. And when a task triggers discomfort, the limbic system wins. Every time. Not because you're weak, because that's the architecture. That's the wiring you were born with. So when you sit down to write the report, start the workout, make the call, and instead find yourself scrolling, cleaning, snacking, reorganizing, that's not failure. That's your amygdala treating an email like a saber-toothed tiger. Overreacting, yes, but not malfunctioning. Just outdated software running on modern hardware. Here's what that looks like in real life. You open the document, your chest tightens almost imperceptibly. You don't consciously register it as fear. You just feel a pull, an itch, toward literally anything else. You check your phone, relief. Instant, chemical, real. Dopamine floods in, not because scrolling is fun, but because you just escaped a threat. And your brain logs that, files it away. Avoidance equals relief. Do it again next time. You might tell yourself you work better under pressure. You don't. What you've actually built is a dependency on adrenaline to override fear, because panic is loud enough to finally drown out the anxiety that was blocking you in the first place. You might call yourself a perfectionist when really you're terrified of producing something imperfect, and having that imperfection mean something about who you are. You might feel a strange, specific shame every time you open your laptop, because some part of you has started associating the task itself with self-worth. And the moment a task threatens your self-worth, your brain will do almost anything to keep you away from it. This is why procrastination isn't solved by trying harder. Trying harder is aiming at the wrong target. You're not short on effort. You're flooded with an emotion you haven't learned to sit with. Now you may ask, why would a brain built for survival sabotage something as harmless as laundry or a work email? Because your nervous system doesn't distinguish between a real threat and a perceived one. To the limbic system, the risk of failing, of being judged, of discovering you're not good enough, registers the same as physical danger. It doesn't know the difference between a tiger and a task with your name attached to it. So it does what it's always done. It pulls you towards safety. And safety, in this moment, means avoidance. That's not weakness, that's a survival mechanism, firing exactly on schedule, just aimed at the wrong century. But the tragedy is this: what protects you in the moment slowly buries you over time. Because every time you avoid, you get short-term relief and long-term cost. The task doesn't disappear. It grows. It waits in the corner of your mind, quietly accumulating dread, until it becomes bigger in your imagination than it ever was in reality. And that gap, between how big the task feels and how big it actually is where procrastination lives and multiplies. Carl Jung once wrote that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. Procrastination is resistance wearing the costume of distraction. So what happens to someone who lives like this for years? They become people who mistake urgency for motivation, who only move when the deadline turns into an emergency. They become people who quietly believe they are undisciplined, when really they are unregulated. They become people who avoid starting things they actually care about, because the things you care about carry the highest emotional stakes, and the highest emotional stakes trigger the loudest alarm. They become people who confuse the fear of finishing badly with the fear of finishing at all, and so they don't finish, they just orbit the task forever, close enough to feel guilty, far enough to feel safe. And here's the part that stings the most. Procrastination isn't just about the tasks you avoid, it's about the identity you slowly build around avoiding them. You get so used to the shame spiral start, stall, panic, produce, collapse that you begin to believe it's simply who you are. Not something you do, something you are. But you were never lazy. You were never broken. You were a nervous system trying to protect you from a discomfort it never learned how to tolerate. So, how do you actually work with a brain like this instead of constantly fighting it? You stop trying to force motivation and start reducing the emotional cost of starting. Motivation was never the prerequisite for action. It's usually the result of it. The brain doesn't need you to feel ready. It needs the first step to feel small enough that it doesn't register as a threat. Not write the report, open the document, not go for a run, put on the shoes. You're not tricking yourself. You're lowering the size of the perceived danger until your nervous system stops sounding the alarm. You learn to notice the moment right before you avoid something, the tightness, the itch, the pull toward your phone, and instead of obeying it instantly, you sit with it for 10 seconds. Just 10. Because most avoidance isn't a decision, it's a reflex. And reflexes lose power the moment you become aware of them. You stop punishing yourself for procrastinating, because shame doesn't create discipline, it creates more avoidance. Every time you call yourself lazy, you deepen the exact loop you're trying to escape, because now the task isn't just uncomfortable, it's tied to self-judgment too. And a brain avoiding two threats instead of one will avoid twice as hard. You start asking a different question. Not, why can't I just do this? But what feeling am I actually avoiding right now? Fear of failure? Fear of being seen as not good enough? Fear that if you finish, you'll have run out of excuses for why your life doesn't look the way you want it to? Because once you name the feeling, it loses some of its grip. Emotions that stay nameless run the show. Emotions you can name, you can sit beside. This is the real work. Not becoming a person with more willpower, but becoming a person who can tolerate discomfort without needing to flee it. That's not motivation. That's emotional regulation. And it's learnable, slowly, imperfectly, one small uncomfortable task at a time. So if you've spent years calling yourself lazy, undisciplined, a chronic procrastinator, know this: your brain was never trying to sabotage you. It was trying to protect you, using tools built for a world that no longer exists. The tiger isn't real, but your nervous system doesn't know that yet. You get to teach it, not through pressure, not through shame, not through another productivity system that demands more willpower from a well that was never the problem, but through small, patient exposure, through starting before you feel ready, through sitting with discomfort just a little longer each time, until your brain finally learns what it never got to learn before, that the task was never the danger. And once it learns that, something shifts. The resistance softens, the dread shrinks, and for the first time, you stop fighting yourself just to begin.